Hello, hello. Let me know if you can hear me. Jamie here. Happy Friday. It is Friday, October 9th, and we are doing your stimulus update and Q&A. And you guys, we actually have stuff to talk about today. We've got some things going on today. So I am live right now on my YouTube channel, Jamie Troll. If you're watching me there, make sure you subscribe. If you're watching me over on Financial Literacy for Women Business Owners, my Facebook group, say hello. If you're not in that, go on over and join, or you might be watching this over on my business page. So wherever you're watching this, hello and happy Friday. So let's get into it, right? We've had some developments this week. We've had a lot of Friday Q&As where we don't have a whole heck of a lot to update on, but today is a little bit different. So I'm going to take you back. Let's go back in time. We're going to talk about the stimulus bill that has been going through Congress for months and months and months now, actually, which is supposed to be the second kind of comprehensive stimulus bill. So a lot of times when we say stimulus, we might get that confused. Some people get a little bit confused around the stimulus checks. The stimulus checks are part of a broader stimulus bill. Okay, so those $1,200 checks we've been talking about would potentially be part of the next round of stimulus, but there's a whole heck of a lot more. So if you were around last Wednesday, I gave a whole rundown on the HEROES Act 2, which was the proposal that was passed in the House. It was the Democratic proposal. We knew it was not going to pass in the Senate. And that was a $2.2 trillion bill. Now, they came down from 3.6. So let's go through all the numbers and where we've been over time. In May, the Democrats said had the first HEROES bill that was 3.6. Then we were down around about 1 billion at 1 trillion. Did I say trillion? Should be trillion. losing 3.4 trillion, 1 trillion from the Republicans. Then that actually went down to 500 billion from the Republicans. And then the Democrats came down to 2.2 trillion. And the Republicans came up last week or so to about 1.5 was about where they were at. 1.5, 1.6, somewhere in that arena was where they kind of landed. So they were still pretty far apart, and even more so than just the specifics around the, even more so than just the specifics around the numbers, right? We're talking a lot about the numbers because that's the easiest way to kind of get it in our heads. There's a lot of differences in just the, what would be included in the bill. Now, interestingly enough, I would say that they agree on like 90% of things. There are a lot of things, maybe not 90%, but a large majority of the things that specifically impact you as a small business owner are things that both groups agree on. But there's a lot of other things too that they're in disagreement on. So those have been the things that have really held up this negotiation. And so Tuesday, I believe, this week has been a year. Tuesday, President Trump said, nope, we're done. Stimulus negotiations are over, which was a little bit of a surprise, to be honest. As I've been following this pretty quickly, it seemed like there might be actually progress being made. But he said, you know what? We're not going to do it anymore. And then he started to advocate for 2 or 3 kind of clean bills to go through. So that means he just wanted to pass like very targeted bills on specific items that one of them would have been PPP, but not a comprehensive bill. The Democrats have been really, really keen to push a comprehensive bill because they know they have more things that they want to put money towards. And if they give on the things they agree on, they're not going to get any of the stuff that they don't agree on, right? So that's kind of where we're at. And I try to be as politically neutral when talking to you guys about this as possible. That's just the facts of kind of where these parties have landed. The Democrats have been really clear, you know what, we're not going to do a piecemeal bill because that doesn't work for us and the things that we want to include in it. And we think we're going to get left out to dry on some of the things that are important to us. So we need to keep negotiating and find a common ground on a broader stimulus plan. Seemed like that was dead, but last night, Trump said again, now he's back on board with a broader plan. So whether it was political theater, all of this, and mind you, let's be clear here. I don't mean just on the part of the president. I mean on the part of everyone involved. There's a lot of political theater. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of optics. There's a lot of probably seeing how a message lands and then reevaluating if the narrative is not going the way that you like. So that's what happens on all parts of this. That is generally how this political process works. So I'm not honestly all that surprised to see the reversal. I think with the announcement by Trump on Tuesday caused some turmoil in the markets. And, it depends on which side of the coin you're on, probably how you saw that move, right? Let's be honest. We see things through the lens of our own ideology. So if you identify more as a Democrat, you probably were very upset with President Trump over that, feeling like he pulled the plug on it before he needed to. There were a lot of feelings on that side. On the other side, if you identify more as a Republican, you probably felt maybe it was justified because there was too much extra stuff in the Democratic bill that they were trying to push through that wasn't relevant. It depends on which side you're on and who you're listening to, probably, let's be honest, which of those you felt. So regardless of all of that, we are now in a place where it looks like maybe a negotiation is back on the table. I just saw basically within the last hour, they have sent over, Trump's office basically has sent over a proposal of roughly 1.8 trillion to Nancy Pelosi, who's basically been in charge of the negotiations from the Democratic side. So they were at 2.2. The Republicans have now come up another 200 billion to 1.8. Will it be enough? And I think it's really going to depend on also what those differences are, right? Again, it's not just a dollar amount they're arguing about, it's where those dollars are going and how it's worded. So we don't know enough about what that 1.8 trillion has in it, or more importantly, probably what it doesn't have in it, to know whether it's going to be acceptable or even a place that they're willing to continue talking. So we will see. But negotiations are back on. They are talking again, which I think is a good thing, because the idea that we were going to have to wait till after the election to see any movement on any of this was a little bit of a struggle. At that same point, though, I'm still not holding my breath. I still think, this thing could fall apart. It's very tentative right now. We have a lot of highly charged things going on. But I tell you, everybody is thinking about how this will be viewed going into the election. No matter who you are thinking about Republican, Democrat, they are thinking about how is this going to be spun? How is a no deal going to be spun? How is it going to impact them on the election? How's a deal going to be spun and impact them in the election? So there's a lot of calculations that are going on here, and we just need to hope and pray that they will do what is right for the American people, whatever that is, right? That they can come to a place that is right for the American people in all of this. But we will see if that's true. We will see if that's true. Okay, so that's kind of the update as of right now on the stimulus negotiations. I have a second update today. I see you guys on here. Hi, I'm just going to say hey to some people that I see on here. Hi, Tina. Hi, Caitlin. Yes, the possible new bill. It's possible. We don't know the details. Let's see. Hi, Jessica. Hi, Claudia. Hi, Samara. Hi, guys. Okay, so I really try because you guys, I know we all see things through our own lens. And I think it's really important that we can at least, even if we don't agree, we can understand what's going on the other side, because this whole one side is evil and one side is right, it doesn't work on at all. That's not going to get us to where we need to be. And we need to be in a place where even if we don't agree, we can at least see where it's coming from. So I really try to do that when I talk to you guys, because I know there's just a lot of political charge around all of this. And I know in the group, I'm very clear on I don't want to get into politics, i.e. calling out specific parties, I think is tough, specific names. It just gets really heated really fast. And nobody's going to change their mind on a Facebook post, you guys. So we don't need to argue about it. Go call your congressman. That's what I want you to do. Okay. All right. Go back and watch. There's possibly another deal in the works, or the same deal, a modified deal. Okay, so the other thing I want to talk to you guys about is the news on Ppp Forgiveness. So I posted about this today as well. So there's some news I think part of it had to do with the fact that there hasn't been movement on the stimulus bill, that Treasury decided to take action that was within their purview. So Treasury, let's pull it back. Treasury can't give blanket forgiveness necessarily to loans, right? This blanket forgiveness and PPP loans, we're talking about the banks and some government officials were advocating for blanket forgiveness for loans under $150,000. What does that mean? Just a lot less documentation that you would have to provide to get your loan forgiven. You could have a certification and provide a lot less detail. So that was one of the things that has been in multiple drafts of these stimulus bills, has been around simplifying the process to apply for PPP forgiveness. So now, because something was not passed, I think Treasury said, okay, well, what can we do? And Treasury has put rules in place to make it a little bit easier and to make the application process a little bit easier for loans under $50,000. So we were talking about under 150. Now they've taken that down. They said, okay, loans under 50,000. So you guys who are my solopreneurs would fall into that. And maybe only having a couple of employees, maybe as well. If your loan was under 50,000 or under, so that's important. If it was 50,000, also this counts for you. Then your application is simplified even more. And here's the kicker on this one. You don't have to worry. Now, my solopreneurs already didn't have to worry about this, but if you had employees, previously you were worried about the FTE calculation, proving that you have the same number of employees, number of full-time equivalent employees, and also the salary and hourly wage reduction. Like if you had reduced someone's salary from $15 an hour to $12 an hour, or something like that. So those were things that previously could have impacted your forgiveness and reduced your forgiveness. If your loan is under $50,000, though, they're basically saying it doesn't matter. They're going to essentially say that overall, all of those loans added up together are such a de minimis amount of the total loans given that they are fine to not have to go through that process. Why do I like that? I like that because the FTE calculation specifically is the most arduous and confusing part of the PPP forgiveness application. And yes, they had put in some additional safe harbors that would make it easier, but you still had to go through that calculation process in most cases, or in a lot of cases. So this kind of just takes that pressure off of those business owners to say like, okay, I can breathe. I don't have to worry about that piece of things. And I think that probably should have been in there from the get-go. Because it was a lot of burden to put on these business owners. So you still have to, there's still a short application. I will show you where to find it. And you would use that application, and then you still have to have some documentation that you would have to give in as well, payroll reports if you have them, etc. But you would not have to go through that whole process. So now there's 3 applications, you guys. And again, like this could change if another stimulus was passed. This could change this. So, but right now there are 3 different applications. One, if your loan was 50,000 and under, okay. So you definitely, if your loan was 50,000 and under, you would use that application. One, if you, one that's an EZ form, that there are some qualifications around being able to use the EZ form. And that's really if you haven't reduced your employees and haven't reduced their pay. And there are some other qualifications as well. And then the third one is the full form where you got to give them the whole shebang, right? So the hope is for, you want to qualify for number 1. If not number 1, then number 2. Otherwise, you got to do the full form. But again, all of this still could change if there's some traction on what's going on right now. Okay. And yes, and the tracker, so the tracker is still relevant. So again, if you have under 50,000 though, don't worry about the tracker. You don't really need it unless you want to have it, because you can put in some of your supporting documentation and stuff like that. But if you are over 50,000, you definitely want to have my PPP tracker, jamietrall.com/PPP tracker. So go grab that, because it'll fill out, it'll tell you whether you need to do the EZ or the regular, and it will fill out all of that information that you need to have in there. So make sure that you have that again, jamietrall.com/PPP tracker. It's free. Go grab it if you do not have it. So let's see. Okay. So I'm going to show you guys really quickly the Treasury website so that people just know when you're going to look for information about PPP specifically, here is where you go. Okay. So if you go to treasury.gov, you will get to this screen and you'll just hit on that little red bar here that says for small business seeking direct relief from COVID-19, click here to learn more about Paycheck Protection loans. There's a lot of stuff on this page. Let's see. And now it's not wanting to do it. It's not even going anywhere for me. Okay, well, I don't know. Y'all tell me if it's working for you when you do it. I'm going to open another browser and see. But that's what I've been using forever and ever. Nope. Oh, I was already on that page. That's why. It's Friday. Okay, so when you go there, you're going to come down here and you are going to see all the information on PPP. The nice thing is for most of this, they have dates on here so you can look for what's relevant. But what you want to know from a borrower perspective, you want to go under the for borrowers and you want to, and there's a lot of information here, but you can see the application form 3508S. That's the new one, 3508S. That is the one if you have under 50,000. So let's take a look at it really quickly, just to show you what it looks like. Okay, so blow this up a bit. So if y'all have seen the original application, it's quite longer than this. Even the easy application is longer than this. Sorry, I've got a tickle in my throat. But really, the only numbers you have to fill in are going to be this upper part here. So it's still the PPP loan amount, the disbursement date. This is just total number of employees. This is not FTEs. So I think some people were confused as to why is this still on here if FTEs is not important anymore and doesn't reduce forgiveness. This is more, I think, personally, just them gathering this information for other purposes, right? So this isn't even FTE. It's just total number of employees that you're going to put in. You don't have to go through any kind of crazy FTE calculation of like a partial employee, blah, blah, blah. That's just, I had 5 part-time and 7 full-time. So I had 12 employees, right? And then they do still want you to put your EIDL advance amount in here, which means the intent is likely that they still will be reducing your PPP forgiveness by your EIDL advance amount. And then down here, these are all the same certifications you have to make, basically that you used it correctly, that you didn't pay yourself more than 2.5 months salary, et cetera, et cetera. But it's 2 pages, but one of the pages is just instructions, payroll reports if you have them, that kind of thing. So that's the new form. And there's a form out there, and then there's the instructions for it, as well. So the instructions and the form. There's also the easy and the application form for the easy. And you can see if you go in the easy instructions, it's going to give you this top box is going to be where you determine if you can use the easy form or not. Remember, this is for loans over 50,000. You'd have to go to this step. If any of these applies to you in the instructions, then you would not have to, then you would be able to use this form. And watch my tutorial. I have a whole tutorial on the easy form and a whole tutorial on YouTube on the full form. So you can watch those tutorials for how to fill it out. And then down here is the one that just says application form here. Those are the full application form. So let me pull out of here. Let's see. Okay. So no, there's not automatic forgiveness. You can watch back to the beginning. There are some changes. There's another application that makes it even easier for people under 50 who have under 50,000 under 50,000 employees who had under $50,000 of a PPP loan. There is a new, even more streamlined version that means you don't have to worry about your FTE, your employee count, or your salary hourly wage reduction. Those things which previously could have reduced your PPP forgiveness. If your loan was 50,000 or under, it won't impact you. And there's an easier form for you. That's what I was just kind of walking through. But no blanket forgiveness. Although again, if the stimulus talked about in the beginning, the stimulus negotiations are back on, that could be something that we see. So the question I'm getting now is, do I apply now? Let's say your loan's under 50,000 and you're like, well, now it's easier, right, to apply. Do I apply now or do I wait? My answer to that is the one thing I can still, well, there are two things that I think could get even easier. I don't think it's going to get harder to get forgiveness. There are two things that might make it easier or more advantageous for you. Okay. So number one, if this blanket forgiveness is passed, then you may not even have to give those bank statements or those payroll reports or anything like that if your loan is under probably about 50,000. You may just be able to give that little sheet of paper and then be done with it without any support at all. So that change would be a congressional change that would have to happen through the stimulus. And this is probably the bigger one because that's more of an admin headache, but probably not a huge deal, right? The EIDL advance. If you guys saw my live on the HEROES Act, now again, that was the Democratic proposal. It's not going anywhere. But if something like that made its way into the final bill, there was a provision that said specifically the whole rigmarole about having to subtract your EIDL advance from your PPP forgiveness. They were removing that. And they basically said, we didn't mean to do that anyway. I think they realized that the administrative headache of having to subtract that off the loans and then therefore giving a bunch of sole proprietors $1,000 PPP loans because they got an EIDL advance was kind of silly, right? So I think that's something that is not in this, that has not changed yet. That would take likely an act of Congress to do. And so you might, if that's a concern, if you got the advance and you're like, man, it'd be nice to not have to make that turn into a loan and to be able to actually keep that money, you might want to wait and see what happens with these stimulus negotiations. Remember, I always have to remind you guys, 10 months. You have 10 months from the end of your forgiveness period. Okay? 10 months. 10 months. So, or from the end of your covered period, your 8 or 24 weeks. So from the end of there, you've got 10 months to apply for forgiveness. So I know a lot of people really want to get on that now, and I totally understand being that type of person, but I really do think that they're only going to get more lax with this in terms of forgiveness. So that's what I would say to those of you who are kind of in that boat. Now, I have seen, we did get our first submittal that somebody had their loan forgiven, which is amazing. So like fully forgiven has been through the SBA. So what was happening for a long time is some people were applying for forgiveness if their bank allowed them. Not all banks have opened it up yet, but if their banks allowed them, they were some people were applying for forgiveness, but the banks were processing them, but then they just sat at the SBA. The SBA was not processing those PPP loans, those PPP forgiveness applications. So I think they've been kind of waiting also to see what happens with Congress because they don't want to put a lot of effort in the whole process is going to change. Now I got notification. Autumn was the first person to tell me that she was able to get forgiveness and she got confirmation today that it has been fully forgiven from the SBA. So I do also appreciate the feeling of like, I think for her, that's probably just a weight off to be like, I've got it. And I can't see your name, but I'm assuming that this is you, Autumn. I'm assuming this is you, Autumn. So yes. So I would imagine you're feeling pretty good right now. And so for those of you who are just like, I just want to get this thing over with, feel free to go through that process, right? But it could mean, the slight possibility that it could mean that if they do change EIDL, I don't think maybe they would forgive those. I don't know. So maybe Autumn, I don't know if you got the EIDL advance, but if that turned into a PPP loan for you, maybe they would forgive those as well. So we'll have to see, but that's just something to keep in mind is that those two things may still happen to make it even easier, but you don't want to forget. You obviously want to make sure that you apply for forgiveness at some point. Okay, let's see. Yes, I agree. I think it's a step in the right direction. It's actually written not too differently than the HEROES Act was. I feel like they kind of took that out of the HEROES Act because the HEROES Act had carved it up and had the 50,000 and under, and then they had at least some simplification for 50,000 and under. And then for 150,000 and under, there was a little bit of simplification, but not quite as much. They still had to do the application. There just wasn't as much support. So I think they did what they can do. But again, Treasury can't make certain changes. Like Treasury can't change the fact that the EIDL advance is subtracted from the PPP loan forgiveness because it's actually written into the CARES Act that amount be subtracted. So Treasury can't overrule it, but they can put kind of rules in place where rules don't already exist, right? On things that are unclear, they can clarify and they can put those procedures in place. Okay. All right, guys. And if there is, on the question of a PPP tracker, if we do have a stimulus and anything significantly changes, we will put out a new tracker. Right now, what I'll say is the only people now that don't, basically, if your loan is under $50,000, don't even fool with the tracker. You probably don't need it. Unless you really want to kind of look at it that way. But you have a simplified process where you just have to fill in some numbers in that application and then sign your certifications. So, but if there were to be changes in the next round of stimulus, we would update the PPP tracker as needed and send that out to people. But again, those would only serve to make things easier. So you could, if you were fine under the old version, you would be fine under the new version too. They're just, the only way they're going to go with this is to make things a little bit easier on people, either administratively or to get forgiveness. Okay. So as far as loans, EIDL, they were not giving out EIDLs to people, at least back before, they were not giving out EIDLs to people who weren't profitable. It is tougher because usually you have to have some show of profit. You might be eligible for PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, to help you, even if you're in a loss position, but there was less available. Now, there could be, grants or things like that locally that you could look into as well. I'm not sure what their qualifications are, but it is harder if you haven't been in a profit position to be able to get a loan. Okay. All right. What else we got? Let me see what April says, I get so many people caught up on the FTE count, but like you showed us, we can document the required closures, et cetera, affected our business ops, and we didn't reduce base wages by 25% or more. We don't need to worry about it. Yes. So what you're talking about, April, I'm going to pull it up just to show you guys. Sorry, I swear I don't have COVID. I'm good. I just got something stuck in my throat. Does anybody else feel like super awkward when you cough in public? Like, I feel like everybody's just like shifts their eyes to you and like takes a step back. I don't know. I wonder if that will continue after all of this. We're all very suspicious. Super awkward time to have allergies. Okay, so so the easy instructions, April, is where we're gonna go look, and I'll show you what you're talking about, which is the third one. Okay, so you can go and read these, but the third one to qualify for the easy form is the borrower. Okay, so the borrower did not reduce annual salary or hourly wages of any employee by more than 25%. Okay. So you basically, it's just saying you didn't, if you reduce their annual salary or hourly wages, you brought it back up by the time, let's see, in this one, it says between March 1st and January 1st and March 31st. Basically, like during your covered period, if you brought it back up by the end of your covered period, then you would be okay. And then this is what you're talking about. The borrower was unable to operate during the covered period at the same level of business activity as before February 15th due to compliance with requirements established or guidelines issued by the Health and Human Services, CDC, OSHA. So basically, if it was around sanitation, social distancing, you had to be closed. It had to be during your covered period, right? So like if you were closed down, but then you were back up to normal and didn't have any of these, there weren't any health things that made it such that you could not operate at your normal capacity, right? So this doesn't cover like, we just didn't have as much business. This is like, I own a restaurant and our state mandate said that we had to, we could only have half capacity, right? So like that would be an example. Or if you just had to be closed during that time period because it was essentially mandated you couldn't safely social distance, right? So these aren't things that are just like, well, my business was down and therefore. This is, my business was down because I was basically forcibly shut down or couldn't get back to the level of business because of social distancing, sanitation, requirements that are actually out there. So that's where I don't think everybody will fall into this, but a lot of businesses will, which means you then get to use this EZ form, which means it's much easier to then apply for forgiveness, if that makes sense. But I have a whole tutorial on this specifically and when you can use the EZ form as well. But yes, you don't have to worry about, I think here's my kind of interjection on this. Oops, have I not even been showing this? You guys, it's a Friday. This is what I've been showing. It's the forgiveness application form. I was looking at the third box down here. So I just read that whole thing thinking you guys could see my screen and you couldn't. It's great. It's great. It's great. Okay. But yes, that is one of the things that we can look at. I think they realized the way that the CARES Act was written was very clearly they wanted to incent the right behavior. And that behavior was they wanted people to hire employees back, right? And so I think when the CARES Act was actually initially passed, we thought, I don't know, I mean, like silly us, right? But I think we all thought like, okay, we'll close down for a little while and then we'll like get back up and running. So like those businesses that were shut down for a couple of like a couple weeks, couple months, whatever it was, would then be hiring back employees and going back to normal. And then I think the reason that they've started to kind of loosen up on some of these FTE rules and all of that is really because of the fact that that's not what really happened, right? And so then they try to get looser on like, okay, well, we're going to put these safe harbors as long as you hire them back. It said it was June 30th. Now it's December 31st. We keep kicking the can. And they've given more and more this added one here that we just talked about, where if you essentially couldn't go back to normal capacity because of safety regulations, right? That was a new thing. That wasn't part of the CARES Act. That came out later. So they're just trying to they're realizing like, okay, the rules that we had were structured and there was a point to them, but in the actual world we live in today, they don't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. So I think they're trying to walk back some of that to say, all right, like we need to make this easier on business owners, not harder. If people took this money and tried to do what's right for their businesses, right, and didn't go buy a new car, but like paid their employees, then they need to get forgiven for this money, you know? So I think that's really what the purpose was. Let's see. I did. Okay, so I did not reduce more than 25% for employees that stayed employed, but had to furlough a few employees. Do I qualify for the safe harbor? So I'm assuming your loan is over 50,000 because you don't have to worry about, if your loan was under 50,000, you don't have to worry about qualifying for safe harbor for FTE count anymore with this new Treasury guidance. If your loan was above 50,000 and you furloughed them, you have to bring them back by the time you apply for forgiveness or December 31st at the latest, to be able to then get safe harbor, unless you fall into that one that we just talked about, which was you're shut down because of OSHA, et cetera. Like you can't bring them back because of safety regulations, whatever. So there are a few caveats. Like I said, they're just adding all these caveats. But I just feel like everybody should be able to get forgiven. So if that's not you, you can bring those employees back. And as long as they're back on your payroll during that payroll period that you either apply for forgiveness or December 31st, whichever is later, then you will be able to get safe harbor too. So let's see. So if your clients had to shut down, do I qualify for that safe harbor? So your clients are travel agencies, or are you a travel agency? I think either way, that probably isn't necessarily Sorry, guys. One of those days. One of those days. Yeah, thank you, Bree. So this is a good safe harbor tutorial video. Bree shared it. If you're watching this in the Facebook group, you can probably go jump on over there and see it. But if it's just due to like reduced business and not because necessarily of actual like social distancing, that kind of thing, it's just COVID had an impact on your business. Like not as many people wanted to travel because of COVID. They can travel. There's still planes. There are still hotels, but if they, if essentially like you just had a decrease in business, it probably wouldn't strike that one more than likely. But I don't know. I mean, it says specifically because of requirements established or guidance issued between March 1st, 2020 and December 31st, 2020 by the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Director of Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So you'd have to be able to go look at what they put out there, related to the maintenance of standards of sanitation, social distancing, or any other, et cetera. So you would have to be able to point back to this was the thing that made it such that, we couldn't go back to normal. So I think the easiest thing to do, just honestly, is if you have a loan over $50,000, that you just do your best to get your FTEs back up by the time you apply for forgiveness. If your FTEs are back up to where they were pre-COVID, by the time you apply for forgiveness, you're fine. You don't have to worry about it. And also that your salaries and wages are back up, right? But that's just base salary. So if they're commission, there's still not as much work to do. You're not responsible for making that up, right? It doesn't have to be back up to that. But if somebody had an annual salary of $60,000 and you took them down to $40,000 annualized, you'd have to bring them back up. Or if you had an employee $17 an hour, you moved them down to $12 an hour, you'd have to bring them back up. So I hope that makes some sense. Hang on, I gotta block somebody. Fun. Always fun. I love YouTube. I'm gonna tell you guys, I love YouTube. But you guys in my group, like, I don't have to block y'all in my group because you don't say weird things. YouTube is kind of the wild, wild west. We get some interesting people on YouTube that like to say some interesting things to me while I'm talking live, which is not distracting at all, I promise. Okay, let me just look through. I won't go back through all of it, but you guys can rewatch this if you missed the beginning of it. Let's see. Our loan was for $76,000. We are using the 24-week period. After we used up all the money, we had an employee resign. We haven't been able to rehire anyone for the position. We'll be able to qualify for safe harbor. So just importantly, safe harbor only matters if you didn't do what you needed to do during that 8 or 24-week period. Okay. So, it only matters now if you're still within the 24-week period. It sounds like you probably are when they resigned. You would have to show proof of them resigning, right? And then proof that you couldn't hire someone like equal, right, by December 31st. So if someone just resigned and you put no effort into backfilling that position, then that could potentially impact your ability to get safe harbor. They want to see that you tried to backfill that position. So yes, it's fine if they resign, but there is still some work to be done to prove out why that person could not be hired. A similarly qualified person could not be hired between now and the end of the year to make sure you were all buttoned up, right? But again, if you fall into this second bucket here where you were shut down because of OSHA or CDC guidelines, or you had to socially distance and couldn't get back to your old level of business because of that, then you may not have to worry as much about the FTE calculation either, if that makes sense. So I've got lots of videos that go into a lot more detail about this stuff and actually walk you through the application. It's hard to kind of give you the highlights because some of this discussion can get pretty detailed when you're talking about businesses, especially if you've had businesses that have had to let go of or furlough employees. That's where this gets a little bit more strategic and how and when you apply for forgiveness. So I always like to say, it's just always best practice. Apply when you have more employees, right? And if you're going to apply for forgiveness after the end of the year, make sure that last pay period, that December 3rd, that falls over December 31st, is a pay period where you have the most employees, basically. That's just general best practice to have the best chance of getting the most forgiven as possible, which hopefully all of y'all get it fully forgiven. Let's see. I would imagine so. I don't know how your bank works. I don't know if you probably have to contact your bank and see how that application works, if you can start over or not. Let's see. Haven't heard from my bank. Under 50K. FTEs all back up. You can't apply. Well, your bank's going to have to give you instructions to apply. So you don't apply through the SBA. You apply through your bank. So your bank is going to have to either tell you, here's our portal, or here's where you send the application, or they're going to have to give you some instructions. So if your bank hasn't done that, you can reach out to them, because just in case you missed it or something like that. But some banks haven't opened that up because they've been waiting on Congress. So you have to have some place to actually send that application. You can work on it, but they may actually have a separate portal that you're going to go in and enter these questions into. It may not be like, in most cases, you're probably not going to send in the paper application, but their portal will basically ask essentially the questions that are on the application. So you can go get familiar with the application and do some work on that so that you have that information readily available. Hey, I got PPP loan for sole prop on July 31st. Oh, I think I saw your question in the group. And exhausted the funds. Would it be okay now to certify for unemployment? So yeah, so you got 2.5 months worth of pay, basically 10 and a half weeks, something like that. So you got that much of PPP. You either stop certifying during that period of time or claim that PPP income on your unemployment certifications, which will likely reduce it or maybe eliminate it entirely. After that's up, though, even if you're still within the 24 weeks, it was only 2.5 months of pay. It doesn't make sense that they would lock you out of unemployment for 24 weeks when they only gave you 2.5 months worth of pay. That wouldn't make any sense, right? That's 10 weeks is not the same as 24 weeks. So yes, once that's done, if you still qualify for unemployment, right? Like you have to make sure you qualify and go look at your state, because some of them have reinstated like the job search requirements or have some different things for people who are self-employed, right? You have to make sure that you still are within the requirements to be able to get unemployment. And if you are, you could recertify that. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, guys. Well, that's it. And I'm like losing my voice. So I'm going to go get something to drink. Y'all, you guys are awesome. I'll let you know. We'll see if next week brings anything of interest, because we are now in like the, final countdown on all of this with regards to the election and what's going to happen before the election and what's going to get pushed. So, but it does look like, and if you missed the beginning of this, I talked about where we are with Congress, where the president is now signaling support for a broader bill and has released a counteroffer. So we will see. I will keep you guys updated. Again, make sure you're in the Financial Literacy for Women Business Owners Facebook group if you're not, because I'm going to be updating you guys over there. All right. You're awesome. Talk to you later.